Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's CRM Magazine web event brought to you by CSG and Calabrio. I'm Bob Fernikes. I'm the publisher of CRM Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled 2026 CX Megatrends, Predictions, Priorities, and Guidance. But before we start, I just want to explain how you can be part of today's broadcast. We will have a question and answer session at the end. So please, if you have any questions during the live broadcast, just type them in the question box, provided, hit submit, and we'll get to them in the final 10 minutes or so. And if for some reason, don't worry, if we can't get to yours, we'll follow up by email within a couple of minutes. Within a couple of days. So now to introduce our speakers for today, we've got Frankie Taboyek, Product Marketing Manager at CSG. Welcome, Frankie. And Dave Hoekstra, Product Evangelist at Calabrio. So now I'm going to pass the event over again to Frankie from CSG. Welcome, Frankie.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Frankie Taboyek. I'm a Product Marketing Manager at CSG. At CSG, we help brands connect the dots across every touch point, from contact center to mobile apps to proactive communications. Today, I'm really excited to walk through with you our 2026 CX Megatrends, what the data is telling us, what's changing, and where leaders can focus next. I'll share highlights from our State of the Customer Experience research, the key trends impacting the business, and practical guidance you can use as you plan for the year ahead. Before we jump into the insights, I just want to quickly ground in this data. We partnered with Wakefield Research to survey 1,200 digital consumers across the globe. They're primarily focused in North America, Latin America, and EMEA. The sample spans all population types: urban, suburban, rural residents, with a broad mix of age groups, household types, and life stages. What we really wanted to know was what actually builds trust, and where are organizations still falling short from the customer experience, and what do consumers actually want from brands. The insights may surprise you. As we look ahead to 2026, one theme showed up again and again across the data: overwhelm. And honestly, it's something that most of us feel personally. I know that if I open up my personal email right now, I probably have well over 1,000 unread messages. Not because I don't care, but just simply because there's too much coming at me. That same dynamic is playing out in the customer experience. Customers are navigating more channels, more messages, and more decisions ever than before, and it's really starting to break down that connection. Much of this is well-intentioned. Teams are trying to be proactive, helpful, and personalized, but when everything is a message, nothing stands out. And this overwhelm shows up very clearly when it comes to communication. Customers aren't just missing brand messages, they're actively tuning them out. In our research, 70% of customers agreed that brands send so many messages that they stop caring what those brands are trying to say. This is an important distinction, that it's not an attention problem, it's a relevance problem. When messages feel constant or disconnected from what customers actually need, that engagement starts to drop. And this is where overwhelm turns from a CX issue into a business issue. Nearly 60% admitted deleting important messages because they assumed they were marketing. This can include things like account alerts, billing messages, and service updates. So, the consequence of message overload isn't just lower engagement, it's also now missed payments, unresolved issues, and lost trust. This is the moment where that overwhelm stops being abstract and it's starting to directly impact those outcomes. And these aren't just edge cases, they're everyday friction points that quietly erode loyalty and increase the cost to serve. What's important is this: Customers don't want less communication, they just want better communication. So they notice when personalization is missing, and they're more likely to engage when messages feel human, like they were sent by someone who actually understands their situation. They still expect updates, reminders, guidance, and reassurance, especially during moments like onboarding, billing, service issues, or payments. That's where reliability comes into play. Because there are specific interactions, we're showing up clearly and consistently has an outsized impact on trust and retention. So, if customers care about relevance and timing, the next question is, where does that matter most? This slide breaks that down across three key stages of the journey: onboarding, service, and retention. During onboarding, customers are trying to build confidence with your brand. When pricing is unclear, setup is confusing, or guidance is missing, that trust erodes really early in the process. And that's why transparency matters. 61% say they stay loyal to brands that are clear and upfront about pricing. In service moments, reliability becomes even more critical. Missed alerts, payment issues, or inconsistent messaging across channels creates that anxiety, especially when customers are already trying to resolve a problem. And the stakes here are high. 57% say they would leave a brand after a fraud related incident if communication breaks down. And finally, in retention moments, it's often the basics that make or break loyalty. Difficult self-service or lack of follow-up on issues quietly pushes customers away. 44% say that they would stop doing business with a brand after unresolved service experiences. So the big takeaway is this: customers don't judge brands by how often they communicate, they judge them by how they reliably show up in these moments that matter most. If reliability matters most in specific moments, the natural reaction for many teams is to try to solve that with AI. AI absolutely has promise in the customer experience, but the data shows it hasn't earned full permission quite yet. Only 41% of consumers believe that AI agents or chatbots are more effective than human agents at resolving issues, and more than half are uncomfortable with AI taking action on their behalf. So, what I've observed based on this data is that the discomfort isn't necessarily about technology, it's about trust, control, and context. But at the same time, on the bright side, there is some nuance here. Younger consumers, especially Gen Z, see the value of automation when it improves efficiency. So the challenge for CX teams isn't whether to use AI, it's where and how to use it. So with all of this being said, with more messages, more tools, more AI to start creating more noise than value, the real question becomes simple: what's the antidote to this chaos? And the antidote is clarity. Clarity on what customers actually need, clarity on what's working and what isn't across the journey, and clarity on where AI helps and where maybe it shouldn't be used. Clarity reduces noise for customers and friction for teams. But clarity only matters if it leads to action. So, from here, the question really becomes, how do you turn off all of this? How do you turn all of this signal, the data, the moments that matter, the AI, into next steps that your team can actually execute? The good news is the path forward doesn't require that full rebuild. It just starts with a few focused steps. in how teams prioritize, measure, and communicate. When you look across channels and journeys, there are a lot of touch points, but only a few moments that really stand out in what truly matters to the customer. Across industries, we consistently see 5 critical moments where brands can either build trust or create friction. These moments map directly to where customers told us that reliability matters most: onboarding and order moments, billing and payments, customer care, account security, and having that relevance in promotions. Getting these moments right isn't just about doing more. It's about showing up clearly and consistently when customers are most likely to notice. So, how do teams bring clarity to these moments internally? And for most CX teams, that begins with clarity on ROI. Once teams are aligned on those moments that matter most, the next step is measuring them the right way from the start of the project. On the right, you'll see an example of what a strong CX goal actually looks like. It's not vague or aspirational, it's specific and measurable. Reduce abandoned checkouts by 15% on the website in Q4. That single statement clearly defines the target, the channel, the audience, and the business impact. When goals are framed this way, it becomes much easier to track progress, prove ROI, and align teams around the same outcome instead of debating what success actually means. The next challenge is knowing how to measure and monitor goals like this across the journey. And this is where journey analytics create clarity. Instead of guessing or reacting to the loudest issue, teams can see exactly where customers fail to take action, where they drop off, and which breakdowns have the biggest impact on outcomes. The example I have up here shows how teams can visualize that full journey, identify those friction points, and quantify which issues are worth fixing first based on impact and ROI. A visibility like this helps team prioritize with confidence. They can align cross-functional teams and make that focused effort where it will actually make a difference in the customer experience. And I didn't forget about AI. So when teams think about AI adoption, the most important question is not, can we automate this? It's, can AI do this better faster than the experience that we offer today? The data shows customers are open to AI when the answer is clearly yes, they can do it better or faster than the experience today. They're most comfortable with AI resolving questions, reviewing account details, and managing appointments. Tasks where speed and efficiency matter more than some of that new human nuance. Comfort does drop quickly as tasks become more sensitive or higher risk, like payments or account changes. If it doesn't make things better or faster, it probably doesn't belong there. That clarity can help teams apply AI where it actually improves the experience. And this is where the consumer data brings us full circle. Customers want relevance, clarity, and trust, not more messages. These strategies reflect exactly what they told us. First, build AI that feels accountable. AI should clarify experiences, not complicate them. with clear handoffs, guardrails, and outcomes that customers can trust. Second, lead with transparency. Customers respond better when pricing, data usage, and problem solving are clear, and when the value is obvious. Third, orchestrate every interaction. That means moving away from blasting messages and toward coordinating moments across channels based on what's happening with that customer in real time. And lastly, personalize with purpose. Use data to help customers move forward, not to overwhelm them with more messages. Together, these shifts help brands where cutting noise becomes a natural outcome. And that's really the opportunity as we head into 2026. As you think about what we've covered today, the data, the moments that matter, the role of AI, I'll leave you with one question. How can you make every communication count? Because as we head into 2026, the brands that win won't be the loudest, they'll be the clearest. Thank you so much for your time today. If you enjoyed the presentation, we have so much more data and thoughtful advice in our State of Customer Experience report. And now I'll pass it over to Dave.
Thank you so much, Frankie. Hi, everybody. That was great. It's funny, as you are talking about the word overwhelmed, I'm pretty sure myself and everybody on this on this webinar thought of one organization that we deal with that overwhelms, right? It's like, oh, yay, another text, another chat from this brand. And it's funny how reluctant some of us are as consumers to unsubscribe from those, because it's like, what if there's a great deal coming? I got to be careful. So so thank you so much for the handoff. Great work. Really appreciate it. I want to talk to you about some of the mega trends, right? These are not just regular trends. These are mega trends that we are talking about. And kind of what I've subtitled this presentation that's coming up is that, reactive customer service is pretty good idea, but the future of CX is pretty much the same as it always was. And I'll get into that and exactly what I mean by that. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dave Hoekstra. I am the product evangelist at Calabrio. Thank you, Bob, for the introduction earlier. I've been doing this for a while, and I work for Calabrio, and Calabrio is effectively our primary consumer of our product are contact centers, right? Purely customer experience or facing organizations. And I spend a lot of time with these customers and listening to what they want, what they need, and to get out of their day-to-day operations is kind of what we want to talk about today, and making sure that everything aligns there as well. But here's what I'd like to do. A little bit of an exercise for those of you that are joining. I'm going to show you a picture. And I want you to take a minute and look at this picture if you can. I know it's probably kind of small on your screen, but this is a picture of me in 1997 at my very first call center job. Just to be fully transparent, it was a pager company, right? So just to show you how long ago that was. Remember the pager? And what I like to point out in this picture is some of the things that maybe have gone the way of the dodo bird, right? And I know we're not super interactive here, but if you look, you can kind of see, if you look directly above my head, you see the desktop PC on top of the desktop. That's kind of gone away. Those old CRT monitors. There's even a desk phone right above my head in the back there. You got those big old chunky keyboards that make that sound like a gunshot every time somebody types a key. We've got mice with a cord on it. We've got a calculator on the desk. There's even a can of Pringles thrown in just for aesthetics purposes. But it's funny how if you look at this picture, so much has changed in the technology that we use, the way we use it. But you know what hasn't changed is what that customer on the other end of that headset I'm wearing, that corded headset, what that customer expects out of that interaction, that hasn't changed one bit, right? We're still looking for an answer to our question. We're looking for a pleasant experience. We're looking for empathy. And we're looking to get it all done in one contact, right? That hasn't changed. And here we are from 1997 to 2026, and we're still dealing with this same exact problem. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today, is how we kind of return to the fundamentals a little bit. So here's kind of the four mega trends that I see kind of shaping customer experience today. Obviously, Frankie hit on it a little bit, but agentic AI and conversational interfaces is going to be a big one. Empowerment of your agents and or employees. This one is going to really affect how things are done going forward. Advanced visibility of those interactions and conversations that are happening, really being able to get to the heart of the data that we're trying to understand. And then as a fourth bullet point, what I already mentioned, returning to the fundamentals and making sure we never forget why we're doing this in the first place. So let's talk a little bit about agentic AI, right? So agentic AI is the ability for your organization to use the AI tool to not only have a conversation, but to also perform actions as a result of that, right? So we're all familiar with Chat GPT and those types of pieces that allow us to say, hey, here's a question, and here's the answer. But agentic AI takes it kind of one step forward and allows to execute things and make things happen as a result, right? So the problem really surfaces quite a bit is, what do we do? How do we get agentic AI and CX to kind of work hand in hand? I guarantee you everybody that's here has seen some sort of conversation. They've had it with some sort of AI bot where you're able to have a conversation and you immediately hit a wall. And that's common, right? But just remember, that's no different than what things like have always been in our workplace with agents that don't know what they're doing, right? Have you ever called into a customer service line and you immediately know that you're talking to a new rep on the phones? That's kind of where agentic AI is at this point, is really being able to kind of take that next step. And we're still in the early phases of this, right? So AI does have that real strong potential to reduce the costs and increase self-service, right? But what we really have to ask ourselves is, how do we leverage AI in a practice that requires human decision-making, right? So a key element to implementing an AI strategy into this is really, really honing in on when you want that handoff to occur, right? And that's, again, I from personal experience, you go in and you talk with that chatbot. Does it take 30 prompts to get the AI to say, hold on, let me get somebody for you? Or does it take one, right? That's where that sigh of relief comes in. I am not different than anybody else. I want AI to solve that problem for me. And nothing is greater than when you have that AI conversation and the AI just says, boom, and you're done. Hey, that was fantastic, right? But that's still on the rare side. And that empathy, the ability for for your strategy to involve that handoff is so key, right? So as you're thinking of putting together your strategy on how you want AI to supplement and then eventually kind of take most of the lion's share of the work, you really need to make sure that you understand how it's impacting that customer experience. Make sure you do just as much reporting as you on the AI experience as you had with the human experience, right? Is the AI agent handling those people? Are they using frustrated words? Those types of things, to really kind of make sure that we are focusing on those key parts, right? So after that, we want to talk about agent empowerment, right? Now, I use the term agent because I've been in the contact center industry for going on 30 years now. And when we talk about agents, we're just generally talking about employees. Whether you are dealing with a contact center environment, or you're dealing with, employees that are dealing with people face to face, or, in any type of situation, right? We need to focus, and this is what makes this a mega trend, is that with the rise of AI, we're kind of shining a spotlight away from those people that have been the core part of our strategy for a long time, right? So we're starting to see that trend ramp up pretty quickly, and it's evolving even faster. And what's happening is we have the potential of leaving our human employees kind of behind as we focus so much on our AI strategy, right? We all know there are cost benefits to AI strategy and everybody's looking into it, but are those humans receiving the amount of attention that we realize that? And one of the ways you can do this is really by empowering them to be better than the AI, right? And what I mean by that is, can AI issue a refund? Maybe, maybe not. Like, you're getting into dangerous waters there if you do. Can AI give a 2 weeks of free service to make sure that to show empathy and understand the customer has been through the ringer of trying to do that? Generally not, right? That's what we're seeing. But those human beings can. And the more you can empower those employees to do more, to say more, to really make sure that customer experience just goes through the roof, that's what we want to do. And it could be that we want to focus on other areas instead of just focusing on the customer. When we look at things like, what are their schedules that they're working? Do they have the ability to make those changes, right? Do they have work-life balance? So what we're seeing here is that an AI agent is great because it never gets tired. It never slows down. It never, there's no such thing as hold time for the agents that are using AI. But those human agents, we need to ask ourselves, are we doing everything we possibly can to make them love their job? Because they are going to be the key element in an AI strategy. Because granted, we all think that AI is going to solve all the problems in all the world for us. But I mean, just think about the last interaction you had with an AI bot. Did you ask to speak to a human, or did the AI bot handle it for you? And that's could be potentially your answer in exactly what you're trying to solve there. Now, the next trend that I am kind of focusing on a little bit is what we call conversation intelligence. Now, conversation intelligence is the idea that all of these conversations are happening. Some of them are happening with our AI bots. Some of them are happening with humans. Some of them are happening in chat, emails, even in person, right? That is a literal goldmine of information about your customer base and the experiences that they are having. Yet we find that most organizations are very rarely tapping into it as much as they should, or even at all, which is a little scary. But that information will tell you so much about the questions that you possibly have, right? So these new powerful tools are emerging that are really blurring the lines between what we call customer experience and customer intelligence, right? By taking all of that information, transcribing those conversations, taking all that information, putting it into a nice big database, and then being able to mine that information. So those are some of the questions that we are now able to answer that were almost impossible to answer. Like, how many interactions mentioned canceling their service yesterday? How many interactions mentioned the promotional code that we put out in the last week? And is the sentiment of those conversations positive or negative? Like, how do people feel about our group? Remember, we used to sit in a conference room and look at spreadsheets and data trying to solve these questions, and it took days or weeks to even really kind of get our arms around that information. That information is available in minutes now. So being able to tap into this and using conversation intelligence, such a big part of where it trending. And as a final caveat, I say down there in that bottom bullet point, start working cross-departmentally. That means two different things, right? First of all, working cross-departmentally internally with your organization. The billing department working with the finance department, working with the customer service operation, working with shipping and receiving, right? Those cross-departmental relationships are going to become even more critical, because the more data you can uncover and focus on, the more you're going to need answers from other areas, right? Here's a good example. I chewed through some data and I found out that there's a real issue with shipping and receiving in one particular area of our customer base, right? where I have to go to shipping and receiving to get that question answered. So I need to be able to do that. And working across those departments is a really big part of it. The second kind of edge of this particular problem, when we talk about cross-departmentally, is the AI versus the humans, right? Most organizations have a pretty long and detailed strategy on how to measure their agent performance, the productivity, how well they're doing. Are the customers satisfied with that? We've done surveys, we've done all of these different tools, but the strategies on how to measure your AI bots, they're simply in their infancy right now. So the question is, when someone contacts your organization and wants to put forth and they're talking with the AI side of things, are you looking at whether that is actually being handled, or are you just assuming that it's all going well and you're only looking at what actually makes it to a human? Because if you're not focusing on what the bots are doing, you're probably leaving a lot of customer experience out there and on the table, right? So we definitely want to be very cognizant of those conversations that are happening on both sides of the AI versus human. So we're really, really, really taking care of that particular area. Okay. Now, the last kind of focus point here that I like to bring to the table is going back to that picture of me back in 1997, right? And how I said the customer at the other end of that phone has no different expectations then than they do now. They might maybe want it a little bit faster. They might have tried to find this information on their own, but we need to make sure we get back to the basics of what customer experience really is about, right? I always laugh because back then, every third call that I would get was a question like, where do I eat? Where do I mail my check? Or what time does the store close? Or, what time do you close? Those types of things. And people can get that information now in the blink of an eye. They don't need to contact you to get that information. So what's happening is the contacts that are making it through all the self-service options are becoming harder and harder and harder, right? And so those skills that we used to really hope to find in an employee, like empathy, critical thinking, logic, they're becoming more valuable as we go through, because the things that are making it through the filter of the self-service tools are significantly more complex. And the AI bots get in the way in a lot of those instances, right? So with these new powerful tools that we have, the ability to do all of this great self-service stuff, a reminder of really what's really important, that the fundamentals of what CX are all about is now more important than ever. We want to show empathy. We want to show care. We want to end that, get that resolution in the first contact, right? Those are all just those core tenets of what customer experience is all about, right? So putting the customer first is the absolute most important ingredient to a successful strategy. I've already seen some questions that are kind of popping through about how do we build a strategy for our AI and how do we make sure, right? Just put the customer first, right? For those of you with AI bots that are out there in your organization, when was the last time you got in and tested that AI bot as a customer, right? When was the last time you sat down and said, I'm going to put this through its paces? You probably find out that this thing doesn't know anything, right? It can be really frustrating. I'll tell you a quick anecdote here. I just this morning had a conversation with a service that I use, and I got their AI chatbot, and the AI chatbot walked me through, and it did a good job of kind of diagnosing what the category of the situation. And then it said, okay, hold on. And I held on and I held on and I held on. I got no update on where I was. Apparently it had put me in queue to speak to a human, but I got no update whatsoever. And eventually I just thought that something had gone wrong with the chat. So I closed it out. And then I get an email from that support group like, hey, we waited for you and you weren't there. And I was like, well, I never got any kind of notification that I should be waiting. I didn't get any hold music, right? I'm still conditioned to kind of know that something is there. And it was a little bit frustrating because I kind of severed my contact with that particular company because I didn't. And if someone from that organization had gone in and worked through those steps and said, I'm gonna pretend like I'm a customer here, they would have probably realized like, hey, we need some sort of feedback mechanism here that lets the customer know that they're in queue and they're waiting. So there's so many different tools that are out there, so many different ways that we can process through this. We should really get back to the understanding the fundamentals of we need hold music, we need status updates, we need empathetic people, and we need empathetic AI that goes through. And that's that kind of third point, is that the AI, where we are today, the AI should complement and not replace a good practice. And what I mean by that is you should already have a good strategy in place, and the AI is there to complement the service that you currently provide, not replace it. So keep that in mind as you go through. And then the final point here is that we as humans, we're still responsible for the art of CX. Now, so some of you may know the phrase that I'm talking about, where we in a lot of customer service type of mechanisms, there is an art part of the equation and then a science part of the equation, right? And the AI part is the science here, the science of connecting people through technology and really making sure that it's using those large language models and knowledge bases and information to answer those questions. But where it hasn't quite reached its full potential yet is that real magic that a really good customer service person can bring to your organization, right? You ever had that where you walk into a store and you're just like, that person gets it? I've had that where I'm like, we need to hire that person because they are really good at this customer service thing. They understood my problem. They went right to the solution. They did it with a smile. They were friendly, and it made that transaction so smooth, right? AI is not quite to where that art of magic customer service is really going to put us through a lot of those key parts. So that's kind of the overwhelming understanding. So that's what we want to try to bring back, is really helping out these organizations understand that when you're putting together these strategies to go forward, we know it probably involves AI. Whether you're just starting to look at it or you're well into your journey, it probably starts. But we can't forget that the whole reason we do this is because the customer is there and the customer needs us, right? So here's your key takeaways from over what I've talked about. And then we will kind of get to wrapping up with some Q&A in time. But remember, AI is here, whether we want it or not, right? It will not become special until CX becomes the number one priority, right? And I like to think that people out there do think that it's the priority, but their actions don't always show it, right? I think that a lot of organizations are going in with this as the priority is saving money, right? Which is great. We all want to save a little money. We all want budgets to focus in the right area. But if you're only doing it to save money, you're going to have a bad time, right? And so CX needs to be that number one priority of your strategy going forward, if it's not already. And that regardless of the tech, remember, your humans and giving them the ability to feel like they are part of the process is absolutely critical. We cannot forget that the human being, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be pulling these interactions out of the ditch if they go south. And if you have really good people and they know what they're doing, we need to make sure we're taking care of them and making sure that they want to continue to work with us. So you're going to see that the lines are being blurred across all of these different departments, all of these different groups, right? Within the contact center, you have workforce management, quality management, analytics, your CRM team. Those lines are they're disappearing very quickly, and everything is becoming part of this CX strategy. And then we'll throw in AI there as the kind of final piece. And so just remember, at the end of the day, the core concepts of customer experience, they aren't going anywhere, right? So that mega trend, that trend that you need to focus on is keep the priority straight. If you're looking at an AI strategy, define what your priority is and let everything else fall in line. If you're still working through a general customer experience strategy with old school telephones and emails and chats, you still need to put that customer first and make sure that all the decisions trickle down from that kind of core tenet. All right. So from me to you guys, thank you so much for letting me spend a little time with you. My contact information is there on the screen if anyone want to get in touch with me or connect with me on LinkedIn. But that is it from me. And I'm going to ask Bob to pop back in because I think he's going to lead us through kind of a wrap-up scenario here.
Hey, great. Thanks so much, Dave. That was great. And I really appreciate you putting in that picture of you from 1997. I think my cubicle looked exactly the same, same telephone
Yes.
and everything.
Yes,
We actually
they're a little bit
launched.
different now.
Exactly. We actually, we actually launched CRM magazine. Back then it was Sales and Field Force Automation in 1997. So, companies had a website, but it had probably their address and a phone number on it. That was about it.
Yep.
Everything was real new. No Google, no broadband, no mobile, no smartphones. You've been through a bunch of megatrends for sure.
Yeah, I have.
But,
I was the lone email agent in
really,
that contact center, and I averaged about 10 emails a week at that time, right? And so things have changed quite a bit, but except for what the customer wants out of it.
that's hilarious. That is hilarious. Frankie, I don't want to leave you there. We haven't heard from you since the beginning, but we've got some great questions, and I want to encourage everybody. If you've got any questions for Frankie or for Dave, please type them into the question box, and we'll get to them right now. So here's a great question, and I love your presentation. I also was caught by the feeling of overwhelm. We've all been there in some way, shape, or form. So here's the question. Where should I get started when gathering this much data because it feels overwhelming? So where would somebody get started rather
Yeah,
than boiling the sea? Right. So
that is probably the most common question we get asked. And I think the biggest mistake that we've seen is when people try to look at all the data they have at once. And really the most effective place to start is just with that one critical moment with the one clear outcome. So start with something specific, like we want to reduce failed payments in the digital channels. And then once you have that anchor, you can focus the data that much more. So you can only, you can focus on customers dropping off. What messages are they receiving before and after that moment? And which channels are creating that friction where they aren't finishing the payment? So then using that approach lets teams then progress without needing that perfect unified data model on day one, and actually probably keeps it a bit more composed to a single department versus having to work across departments for that initial project.
all right, fantastic. Dave, here's a question. So I'm sure a lot of organizations are still like this, but this person says our organization won't let us empower agents to move their own schedules. Are there other things that we can do to boost their empowerment aside from fixing schedules and things like that? What are the most typical agent empowering things that we can do?
Yeah, so we deal with a lot of organizations that want to allow agents to do things like moving breaks, moving lunches, finding days off and those types of things. And those are all great. And for every organization that does that, there's two organizations out there that are really nervous about letting people do those kind of things, right? They're still holding on to some of those old school methodologies, right? And even little things can make a big difference, right? But when it comes to things outside of that area, it could be as simple as empowering them to give a little bit more of a credit on an interaction, right? So I remember my days at AirTouch Paging, we were allowed $35 a day. That was our credit limit. And sometimes I would burn through that in the first 15 minutes of the day because somebody would call in with an issue and was trying to show empathy. And it was really restrictive for the rest of the day. So it could be something like giving out credits. Or it could be, if we're talking about schedules, it could be things like giving them a little bit more flexibility in when they actually take their breaks, giving your team that does the schedules the flexibility to adjust more, right? Allow expanding the window and when those breaks and lunches might happen, right? So there are tons of things you can do. But I think kind of like what Frankie was just saying, you got to start a little small and kind of see how you can grow into those larger areas. But even the littlest gesture makes a huge it moves the needle quite a bit for a lot of those kind of frontline workers that they're like, wow, actually that was really cool to them to let us do that, and it can help to change that perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like many of these empowerments that we give agents or employees, which I kind of like to use that word as well, but they would have been done anyway, but now you've got to involve another person, and it just becomes that much more clunky.
Yep.
It just doesn't do anybody any good. But that's kind of what I've seen. But okay, so Frankie, okay, so in your experience, where does the most effective sponsorship for CX transformation come from, and how do you get that cross-functional buy-in? Where it's always much more difficult when you're talking about something that's cross-functional. Who exactly are we talking about, and what's the best way to do that? Approach that.
Yeah, that's a great one. I would say in our experience, the CX transformations, they aren't owned by a single executive. They're more championed. And what we've seen is, as Dave mentioned, is pick that most effective executive sponsor that's obsessed with the customer, who can also cut across business and technology and operations. So typically we've seen a chief experience officer or a CIO as that most customer obsessed business leader to be able to help solve those problems. And the pattern that we've seen be successful is once you start with that customer obsessed sponsor who can bridge the business and tech, you can then bring the key functions into designing the solution early. And that's just that they have more buy-in to the process, right? Then they feel more involved. And then after you do that, you can use that data to create the shared vision of truth, focus on the one journey, and then demonstrate impact. And once you have the impact from that one journey that you've fixed or that one problem that you've been looking to solve, then you can repeat that process for even greater impact.
Okay, so if you're looking at like in a larger company or a mid-sized company, somebody like a CIO or a chief experience officer, is that person more in charge of the technology part of it or the human side of it, the customer service side of it? Where does the power usually reside in a mid to large size company?
Yeah, I would say in the mid to large, they're probably more in terms of like the human side of it because they're getting their teams involved, right? And then their teams are the ones that are then delegating who's in charge of the technology side of it versus the human side of it. Obviously, customer support, customer service is an important function to have as part of that because they are ultimately owners of the customer operations. But I would say it's a blend of both, but ultimately at that highest level, they are more focused on the human side and getting their teams around the project.
Great, fantastic. That's always a difficult concept for me to grasp. I'm sure it's not one size fits all either. So, okay, Dave, here's a great question. Should workforce management and quality teams be under the same organization, and are they now?
Oh, that is a good question.
I assume that they were, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, for those of us that are in the contact center industry, I know that me growing up and growing into my career, those were almost always separate entities, right? And they were never in the middle show those meet, right? But what we're seeing nowadays is that they're starting to be. So, short answer to your question, yes, they should be. That's my personal opinion. There are going to be exceptions to that rule, but they should be managed in the same group. And the reason why is because we used to not be able to answer any questions about who and what was happening. It was all just based on gut instinct, right? Oh, a lot of people are mad. A lot of people are happy. A lot of people love this promotion. A lot of people hate this promotion, right? And it was all just based on how we feel, because the tools we had could only measure that tiny little bit of what was out there. So we built tools that could answer the questions we could, like, let's grade every agent on 3 calls a month, and that's whether they're a good agent or not. Or we'd look at metrics like service level, or we look at metrics like shrinkage, and really those were the only things we could measure. And ultimately it was because we couldn't measure what the customer was saying. And now today we can measure what the customer is saying. So what's actually I'm starting to see happen is WFM and QM are starting to blend together, and those older metrics are not carrying as much weight as they used to. And that's what's really getting fun about it, is that why did we measure service level? Because it's about the customer experience, right? Oh, we hit 80/30 today. Congratulations to us. But what if that didn't matter anymore, and we just start looking at the sentiment of what's being said, how it's being said, and whether we can now evaluate every single call and tell you whether the customer felt like it was a good resolution or not, right? So
Right.
as we get farther away from the old school methodology and into the new school, we're going to start seeing WFM teams are going to start answering questions about what was being said on the calls or on the chats or on the emails. So yeah, I think the push should start to be that we bring those teams together, so that when someone says, well, our service level was low yesterday, there's the ability for the team to say, well, why did that happen? And we can evaluate it.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. Okay. So you had mentioned this a couple of times, Frankie, and the question is, how can teams quantify friction so it gets the attention it deserves? And I love that they use the word quantify, because not all friction is exactly the same. And does the solution pop up? Because that's really what we're talking about all the time, is these little frictions that happen and interfere with the communication and the interactions. So how can teams quantify the frictions? First, identify them and then quantify them. Hey, what takes priority over the next one?
Yeah, I would say, it's identifying what you are saying friction is. And I would say it becomes most visible if you tie it to an action or a lack of an action. So maybe instead of just tracking like complaints, look at where customers are dropping off in that process, maybe where they're trying to repeat steps, where they keep trying to click the same button and they aren't going anywhere, or where they're recontacting support, because then you can connect the friction to outcomes like abandoning a checkout, payment failure, increased handle time, because then it becomes more of that business problem and not just a CX issue. And that's how you give it that attention then that it deserves.
Okay, so let's just say there's a friction, and it's something where it's just taking the customer in a loop. How long would it take something like that typically for something like that to emerge, and for people to say, hey, we got a problem here? We're sending these people into a nonstop loop. How long would that typically take, or what's the process there?
I mean, I would say you could, with Journey Analytics, you could leverage and probably identify those types of friction points within a few weeks. Depends, that process and where you're evaluating it. But you can see it relatively fast with a tool that you're seeing the whole customer journey end to end.
Great. Fantastic.
Bob, you could do what I did. I called and I got stuck in a loop. And when I finally talked to a human agent, I said, hey, I've been in the contact center industry my entire career, so what I'm about to tell you is going to sound weird, but your IVR put me through a loop, and you need to let somebody know. And the guy was like, oh, thank you. I'll make sure to put that up the chain. So I was like, I didn't want to freak you out, but it does. You could just you just hope somebody who knows how call centers work calls you and then tell you.
Right. Well, it's funny because you're talking about conversational intelligence before. And I remember, back in the 90s when I was getting used to using a laptop every day, and it's not what I grew up with. And virtually every time I couldn't get the computer to do something, I just knew it was going to be my fault. And when people are using conversational prompts right now,
Yeah.
I'm sure that they're asking questions, not realizing that they're not asking a question precisely enough to get the right
Yeah, all
answer.
the signals are there. We just have to learn how to interpret them right now. Right now, where we at, it's kind of like the Matrix trickling down the screen, right? And we have to
Right.
learn. But as these tools get better and better, I'm going to get a pop up on my screen that says, "Hey, customer's stuck in a loop. Go figure it out." Right?
Right.
And it's going to be really it's going to be the customer's the one that's going to benefit, and that's the best part.
Right. I mean, the big loops you'll find out about quickly enough. It's the smaller hidden ones that could be
Yeah.
there for time immemorial. Okay, so here's a great question for you, Frankie. Okay, so how much of personalizations should be driven by the customer? It's a great question. By customer preferences versus their actual inferred behavior.
Mhm.
So give me what I want, or give me what I asked for, or give me what I need. How do you work that out?
Yeah, I would say we advise that the safest approach is to use preferences where they explicitly gave them, especially for sensitive areas, maybe like channels, frequency. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be calling a customer if they didn't give you explicit permission to be able to do so. But then inferred behavior works best for lower risk moments, maybe like education, next best actions, promotions. But also, being able to test that and see which is working better, because the answer may not always be the same for every use case, for every communication, and for every business. So just being able to have the ability to track what is actually working and what does this customer actually want.
Great. Fantastic. Hey, it looks like we're coming up at the end of the hour, but I'm going to give Dave the last question from Lynn, because he's been very patient. And the question is, how do you recommend that we build a human AI workforce that delivers empathy at scale, and what kind of training is needed for employees to work effectively with AI tools? I realize that's a huge question,
Yeah, it is,
but
but I'll condense it down to a couple bullet points. First bullet
okay.
point is testing, 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 right? Um, put the AI through its paces and make sure that you're throwing scenarios at it that would require empathy, right? My husband just passed away, or my child is sick, or something in those areas. Put it through its paces. And a matter of fact, this is a great exercise for anything, not just AI. Get in a room or in a Zoom meeting, but put away the laptops and whiteboard the heck out of these scenarios that you want to avoid happening, right? And really and then put it through its paces and make sure that it's not going to put you in a weird situation, because that one screenshot of a poor interaction could go viral before you know it, right? And so you just don't want that to happen.
Right.
And as far as training for the agents, they need to understand when the handoffs happen between AI to human, right? Is the AI going to exhaust that customer to the nth degree and then give you off to where they're just so frustrated, or are they going to get it fairly quickly, right? And it's like what I talked about earlier. So, and then have your agents test the AI as well, right? Have your agents go through as a customer and put it through its paces, so they will understand where that transition happens, where the handoff happens, and make sure that it's showing the right amount of empathy. It's tough, but if you let the agents be involved in that process, they're going to be much more receptive to when the customer does make it to them, what they're going to expect.
Right. Right. Just pulling everybody that you know
Yeah,
give them some a skin in the game as well.
that's right.
Everybody likes to be part of the solution. So hey, look, thanks so much for coming on. I want to thank everybody that joined us today. I want to thank everybody that asked us questions. I also want to thank our speakers and sponsors. We've got let me see. Oh, the other thing is, well, I'll get to the house cleaning later, but I want to thank our speakers and sponsors, Frankie Toboy, Frankie Toboyak, Product Marketing Manager at CSG, and Dave Hoekstra, Product Evangelist at Calabrio. If you'd like a copy of the presentations, you can download it once the event is archived. If you'd like to review the event or send it to a colleague, you can use the same web address that you used for today's event. It will work tomorrow as well. Don't worry, it'll be up for 90 days. And don't worry, we will send you an email with all this information in it tomorrow afternoon once the event is posted. So that concludes our broadcast for today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.